Hey guys, Scott here, and welcome to another episode of DBD Idea Review, the series where I read your suggestions from the previous video and talk about how well I think they would actually work in the game and my opinions on it, and what other changes I think, would be beneficial. So, I actually recorded this entire video for 29 minutes, like an hour and a half ago, except I didn't actually record it. So that's fun. My voice and soul may sound a bit dead because I'm just repeating the same things I just said for half an hour, so apologies in advance for that. But take two, let's do it again. So let's start with Gonzo. He starts with Decisive Strike. It lasts 30 seconds, but the timer is paused when in a chase. And I think this is a really good idea because Decisive Strike has always kind of been, it's always rewarded players that didn't actually get tunneled. That's the only part about DS that I hate. If if someone gets unhooked and you charge them and you just down them again and pick them up and you get DS, you deserve it. You tunnel the guy off the hook, that's completely fine. I have no problem with that. In fact, I'm glad there is a perk like that because Survivor experience would be extremely shitty if they didn't have some type of defense against that. However, I feel like 90% of the time I get DS'd, it's because I'm not tunneling somebody. It's just multiple people have it up at the same time, and there's like, I guess I just can't down anybody or do anything at that time. I have to slug everybody, which is stupid. Then they have Unbreakable, and it just it doesn't matter. So this is a very simple version of an idea that I had, but simple is not bad. Simple actually is probably good sometimes. So basically, this would just make it so the Decisive Strike timer is shortened to 30 seconds. It only lasts 30 seconds. However, if you're being chased, it never goes down. Kind of like, how like the whole mending thing is. And I think that would be a very simple and good solution because if you're being chased, then you're being tunneled. So technically, the perk that is supposed to prevent tunneling should never stop functioning because you're still actively being tunneled. Just because you're on the killer for another 3 minutes doesn't mean you're not still being tunneled. So I think that is honestly fine. And it's shortened to 30 seconds because if you're not getting tunneled, you shouldn't be immune to getting, picked up in a completely separate, disconnected encounter that happens, a minute later or 59 seconds later. So that has happened to me many times, and it's really, really annoying. Now, I know Peanuts on the forum said DS is not meant to be an anti-tunnel perk, but I think what he was, because for the most part, he's usually pretty sensible. And what he was referring to, I think, was the original incarnation of Decisive Strike, which, as some of you guys might know, had no prerequisite. If you get downed, you could just get off for free. It was ridiculous. Gachi based that. And it was just absurdly, ridiculously broken. Then they nerfed it a bit, so everyone that was not the obsession had to struggle to 35% before they could use it. But even then, it had nothing to do with tunneling. Everyone could just do it. When they made the change, however, that it only worked immediately after being unhooked, then it became an anti-tunnel perk. And that is just, you can't really argue with that. That's obviously why they changed that. There is no reason they would have the prerequisite of having to be on a hook recently if they didn't intend it to be an anti-tunnel perk. So I know some people cite Peanuts there. I think he was referring to the original version of the perk and not the current version. And if he was, then I don't know why he said that. It makes no sense. It's very clearly designed to be an anti-tunneling perk. So let's make it that. This is a good example. It's very simple. And there are, I think there is a slightly more complicated, but perhaps better way to do it. So in the same vein of this suggestion, basically you maintain that it doesn't go down in a chase. And in fact, you keep it at the full 60 seconds too. So this is going to be actually a little bit stronger than what Gonzo suggested here. However, if you participate in any action that progresses the game in any way, like touching a hook, or touching a generator, anything like that. If you do any of those actions, then Decisive Strike is disabled. Additionally, if someone else gets hooked, then it's disabled as well. And this works because if you're repairing a generator, or you're saving somebody else, or someone else is getting hooked, you're not being tunneled anymore. The point of the perk is now gone. There is no scenario where you could be repairing a generator and also getting tunneled at the same time. It's impossible. So if you have any, action that involves progressing the game, doing gens, saving someone else gets hooked or anything like that, then Decisive Strike is disabled. However, to compensate for it, it lasts the full duration now, and it does not go down in a chase. So you can lead the killer for the entire rest of the match if you wanted to, if you're actually getting tunneled, If you're not getting tunneled, then you don't get to use Decisive Strike, because that's the whole point of the perk. Very simple, and I think that would be the best solution for it. I can't really see any loopholes to that, but maybe there are. Let me know if there's anything that I didn't think about there. Next, I want to go over an idea that I want to show that I'm not actually always going to agree with the ideas. Just because an idea is popular doesn't mean I think it's a good idea. So this is by Space Block, and it's a perk called Supercharge. You supercharge the generator you're working on, making a blinding flash, so obviously a survivor perk. On a 40-second cooldown, you can blow up a generator, losing 15% progress, and instantly blind the killer if they're looking at the gen within 10 meters. His idea is it gives the survivors a powerful ability that sacrifices some of their work on the gen and gives them a chance to escape or hide. It could be fun. He also says that the killer can moonwalk to avoid this. And the thing is, I think survivors should have more tools than just simply pallet looping and hiding. But I think they should be more along the cunning and tactical tools like red herring and diversion and things like that. Survivors are supposed to be the smart, elusive ones. Killers are just the brute force killers. So I don't necessarily agree with this just in basis, but let's pretend that I did. Even mechanically, I don't think it would work, because to have line of sight to a generator, you have to be like within lunging distance of the generator. A lot of the time, generators are inside jungle gyms. So like you have like a long wall jungle gym right here. Here's the window, and here are like the two walls, and then the pallet would be right here. So the killer has to enter here, 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 or here. He's got to enter in one of these sides. However, as soon as he gets past that corner, he's in lunging distance of the generator. So even if the survivor blows it up, I mean, the killer can still see. He can still commit to the lunge and go to his last position, and he'll still be able to kill him. So it's not really gonna do anything. Now, however, if the perk worked in the other way, where it didn't care about walls or anything like that, then that would be kind of stupid as well, because getting blinded through walls would just be incredibly annoying and frustrating. Like, you can make the correct play as a killer to go pick up a survivor, and you face a wall on purpose, but that wall, on the other side of the wall, is a generator, and then a Survivor with Friends teammate just blows up the gen and gets a blind on you. Even, like, I don't know. That seems kind of abusable, and I'm not sure that would be a good idea, especially considering it would be an instant blind, too, that you can't react to. So, like, at least with a flashlight, if, you're carrying someone and someone starts shining and as you're walking past, you can just look away. But if it's an instant blind, you just drop the survivor immediately. No, I think that could be abused very badly, and I don't think that would be a safe addition to the game. Plus, it goes away from the whole tactical things that I think would be a little bit better. So yeah, not too big of a fan of that one. Next is a buff to Monstrous Shrine. Now, this idea I think is really cool, but I'm not sure how possible it would be. So, Lemon Stick's suggestion is 2 basements would spawn on the map, each with 3 hooks as opposed to 4. Current effects would still apply, so it would still kill people faster on basement hooks. Then we need to change the maps to add a second basement or add one that's far enough away so they wouldn't collide with each other. That alone sounds cool, but it's really this follow-up comment by Iron Dragon that I actually think really seals it. So it would make 2 basements connected by non-Euclidean geometry. Basically, that means like the killer could like spectral walk through one of the basements to get to the other basement. And I think this would be a really cool idea to make up for the killers that have no map control. Finally, big maps would have some type of way to traverse them quickly. Clown could actually, get from Red Forest, the corner of the map, to the cabin in, a couple of seconds, kind of like how Demogorgon goes through a portal, just something like that. I think that would give killers without any mobility a bit of a chance to control the map more, while killers that already have mobility arguably have a better use. Hag can transport instantly from anywhere as long as the trap is it. Hillbilly can traverse from anywhere he wants as well. So the killers that actually have map control can still be better, but this kind of makes up the slack for killers that have absolutely none at all. So I think that could be really cool. Now, the problem is not every map has 2 basements, and you'd have to custom make changes to the maps to add 2 basements, or simply not have it work on those maps. There's not very many maps with only 1 basement, but the simplest addition would just simply be it doesn't do anything on those maps, or maybe buff the effects of, killing people on the basement hooks or something like that. You can have like a caveat. If there is no second basement, then the effects of Monster Shrine are doubled or something like that. I think that'd be easiest because I don't see the developers changing every map that doesn't have a basement to add another one, but that would be cool. But yeah, something to give killers more map control on a big cooldown, and it's at fixed points so the survivors could play around it, but just something to let them traverse the map a bit better. Next, we have something by Huge Direction, which is very clever. It's called Bait and Switch. You learn from your experiences with the entity, making it your friend for a while. When you escape a chase, the ability activates when standing in a locker inside the killer's radius. Press the active ability button to teleport to a random locker in the map. When teleporting to a locker upon exiting, you scream and reveal your aura for 10 seconds. And you gain the exposed status effect. I disagree with this even in just basic theme. A lot of people thought this idea was cool, but I don't think survivors should have supernatural powers. I get that it's a video game and stuff like that, but there's nothing really in the game that gives survivors supernatural powers except like oral reading, and even that is just seeing stuff. When you start crossing into straight up teleporting, you're giving survivors basically killer powers now, which I don't think is a good idea. And like I know survivors can do things like that are like aggressive towards the killer, like they can decisive strike but I mean, decisive strike is just, stabbing them with glass so they get stunned. Head on is, stunning them out of a locker. You're physically doing something. Unbreakable as you fight through the pain to get up. Like, there's explanations for all these things. This is just like you just fucking teleport. Like it just seems kind of silly and does not match with the theme of the game at all, in my opinion. That's just the thematic side. Balance wise, it's even worse because you're giving survivors map control now, which is really not a good idea. The one saving grace killers have on big maps is that survivors have to run a very long distance to save people on hooks. If they don't have to do that anymore, they can just teleport randomly and just happen to be near a hook. That kills map pressure, and it removes the one tiny advantage killers have on big maps. So balance-wise, not good. Theme-wise, not good. I am definitely not a fan of this whole idea. Next is a change to No Mither, which I think is really, really cool. So this is by Fabi, and it says you start the trial injured. Or I'm sorry, not injured. So you start the trial healthy. As soon as you get injured, you get the broken status. However, the killer cannot see the broken status on you. He just says survivors, but I think he just means on the person with the perk. Otherwise, that would be pretty strong, actually. That would confuse the hell out of Plague. So basically, when you have No Mither with this idea, you have all the current effects of No Mither. You don't leave blood. You can still pick yourself up off the ground. However, the killer does not know that you have it. They just see you kind of permanently injured once they injure you. They don't see the broken status effect. They just see a guy, that guy's not healing a lot. And then they might notice in a chase, oh shit, this guy has no blood. When I'm chasing him, I can't slug this guy anymore. So it adds kind of a cool thing where the killer has to think about something else. It makes it so No Mither is not a pathetic excuse for a perk. And I think this is a really simple, well-explained change. And I don't really see any problems with it. It's just a good idea. I have no criticisms or anything to add. That is pretty much exactly how I would do it. That is a really, really cool idea. And I would love to see that change in No Mither. Next is a kind of a mechanics change. So this is kind of a more in-depth change. So it's by Stu, and it says, I always thought it would be neat to have heavier pallets that stun for slightly longer on really small, unsafe loops to reward the killer for playing them correctly. So an unsafe pallet is, if you've ever played on the map Hawkins, basically every pallet on the map is what is called an unsafe pallet. It means the pallet does not have to be kicked for the killer to continue chasing you. Whereas like the shack pallet, in every map that has a shack is considered a safe pallet. It has to be kicked for the killer to continue chasing you. You can't really mind game it unless the survivor is really bad. So for unsafe pallets, they're really, they're not good for survivors at all. And that's okay because there's usually a lot more of those. So they have a lot to work with, but sometimes they don't. Like, that upstairs in Hawkins, there's that one pallet with like a desk next to it. And it's like 1 inch long. It's the worst pallet in the entire game. I think pallets like that and other very short, unsafe pallets, giving them a heavier pallet that if they stun the killer for a much longer amount of time is a really cool idea because it's actually kind of hard for the survivor to play those tiles correctly. The killer can just micro-respect it, back up, and then bait it. You don't get the stun. You can micro-respect it, then run through it, and then hit you. And it's really, really hard to play that correctly. So giving them a, like an extra 2 seconds of a stun or something like that to actually let them get away to somewhere that's not a complete dead zone, I think would be really cool. And that's only if they get the stun. I think survivors should be rewarded for playing those hard-to-play tiles better. You don't need more of a reward for playing the shack or like, a long wall jungle gym correctly because those are easy to play. But those pallets are very hard to play and make any good use out of. So I think the heavy pallet idea is really cool, very game-changing, but something I would actually really like to see. It would also discourage bloodlust too, because the survivor would try to get the stun way more. Anyway, so the final suggestion is by Steel Dragon, and it's about Hex Perks. Basically, what he's saying is that all Hex Perks would have a passive and an active effect. For example, he says that the auto regression would be the active effect of Hex Rune, and the amount of regression would be the passive effect. So if you kick a gen with the passive effect after the totem is gone, it would still regress at 200%, but it wouldn't do it automatically anymore. So we basically saying every totem except like Haunted Grounds and maybe like Devour Hope would have a passive effect, which is basically a much weaker version of what the perk is. And I think that is a good idea to some extent. The thing is, Hex Perks are meant to be a very high risk, high reward selection. But due to recent balancing changes and stuff like that, it's still high risk, but the reward has gotten kind of lower and lower. I think the perfect example of a real high risk, high reward Hex Perk is Devour Hope. If they don't find it, you have exposed on all of them and you can mori them. That is a giant reward for a giant risk for a perk that can be destroyed in 10 seconds based, on your map RNG. And you have to build it up over time, so it has to last for a while. Old Rune was an example of kind of a high risk, high reward too. It was very hard for everybody to unanimously always hit skill checks. So it was a high risk, high reward thing because, the totems can be destroyed very easily, but the effect was super powerful. Nowadays, though, I mean, we've got like New Rune and like, I don't know, Lullaby, Third Seal. These are a lot of perks that they have uses and they are useful perks for sure. And they're actually pretty good perks. But I feel like the risk is not being outweighed by the reward anymore. So it's kind of like, I don't really want to run it. So I think the proper solution to this is kind of what Steel Dragon is saying. Have a passive effect, but actually nerf the active effect as well. So the whole basic idea that's not how you use that word. Basic idea of this is reducing the amount of RNG in the game. I think Dead by Daylight has way too much RNG. It's how, all tournaments for this game are a joke, because you could have the same McMillan map with 20 pallets and one with 10 pallets, and then you say the guy with 10 pallets is worse or better. Like, it's not fair. So RNG is a core component to this game, and I think they overkill it a lot. So I think removing as much RNG from this game is, a good thing, because we can keep the whole map RNG thing. That's like a staple of the game, and that's fine. But things like this, I think you can influence, because the layers of RNG of using Hex Perks are what map did I get? Some maps have terrible Hex spawns like Asylum. Some have really good Hex spawns like the Saloon. What map did I get? Where did the survivors spawn? Which totems are actually active hexes? There's just layers and layers and layers of RNG on top of it, and it's not a good feeling to get really lucky or really unlucky. Survivors can get unlucky, never find Devour Hope. Killers can get really unlucky. They find it within 10 seconds. It's just not a good feeling, just being unlucky and losing because of that. So I think the correct choice to fix hexes is basically, have the minimum and the maximum and shrink them down. So for example, instead of Rune regressing at 200% at max rank, maybe it regresses at 125% at max rank and has auto regression when it's active. When it's not active, it just simply has 125% regression rate. So it regresses, and gens you kick regress a bit faster. Basically, so the effect of it when it is up is not as great, but the effect when it is gone is actually something that exists. To compensate, you can make it harder for certain perks, like Devour Hope. Maybe it takes 6 stacks to mori people or something like that. Lullaby takes 6 stacks or 5 because that perk is not even good to begin with. So basically, nerf the strongest aspects of the active totem effect, and then add a new passive effect that is similar to the effect of the active totem, but a lot weaker. So instead of going from absolutely nothing to I have Devour Hope 5 stacks, you shrink it down to I have something. I think that would be a better idea, because no one likes losing to bad luck. And I think that would solve a lot of those issues. There's, you can go into the specifics of what exactly would change with each perk, and you can make a whole video about that, but I think the basic idea like that is a good idea. Just shrink the min and max values, reduce RNG, and Hex Perks will be in a better spot, in my opinion. So I think that was a good discussion. So thank you, Steel Dragon, for that. And yeah, I think that is it for this one. Like I said, I recorded this video twice, so I'm very drained. I'm going to go stop talking now. Thank you guys for watching, and if you want to be in the next one, comments below, suggest it, and I'll give them a read. Thanks, guys.